Welcome back to The Deep Life. Today we are joined by Matt Zeman. Matt is an educator, an author, and a thought leader in the psychedelic wellness space. And I'm really excited to dive into this because, as you guys know, psychedelics and mushrooms have been a big part of Elise and my journey, and Matt is an expert, and we're going to pick his brain a little bit. Matt, welcome to The Deep Life.
Dan, Elise, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Really excited to dive in. But to just get started, let's just kind of keep it really broad. Like, what is it about these plants and these medicines that have attracted you so much and kind of got so much of your attention and your consciousness?
I like that question. It's a good way, good place to start. I think for me, it enabled me to see a bunch of things I hadn't seen before. So we can say, okay, well, part of it was reconnecting with my mom. That's amazing, and that after she died when I was 22, and that's incredible. But also seeing that I was scared of living or scared of dying, seeing that I didn't feel safe and loved in my everyday life, seeing that I was trying to please my parents with everything I did. All of these insights after insights after insights, these medicines have given me, and probably maybe the most is just how interconnected we all are. And coming to that realization, I think I fiercely held on to my independence for so many years and didn't understand how unhealthy that was. And I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to see, was this a one-time thing or does this happen regularly? And it's been incredible. It's been a great journey.
Yeah, that resonates so much because that's very similar to what I've experienced and what I think Elise has also experienced, where there's this connection, like there's this profound wisdom that these plants have that they're able to open us up to, like you said, like perspectives that we didn't have and awareness that we just didn't have, and it's been transformational from
Dan, stick with that for a second because that's something I'm thinking a lot about these days. Because part of me is like, okay, I have to acknowledge and recognize that these plants have wisdom, have an intelligence, have things to share. Okay, that's beautiful. And what keeps coming forth for me, ceremony after ceremony after ceremony, is how much we all have this inner intelligence and how these plants aren't giving us necessarily the message. What they are doing is unlocking our ability to find it within ourselves. And I think that is just I'm seeing that as powerful for me. I'm seeing that as for powerful in the communities that I work in. I'm really liking that we are all um, really incredible beings that I'll speak from the eye that I get lost in my own stories and I get lost on my own um, biases, and these medicines help me unlock that and see it. And then once I see it, I can move through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's incredible. We talk a lot too about on the show, like about our ego. And when we say ego, I'm not sure, the term
Mhm.
to use. Our ego is our identity. It's the persona that's, we walk through. I'm here as Elise, the elite ego personality, like so that I can interact right here on this podcast with us, with Dan, so that I know how I show up in relation to everything in this, third dimensional reality that we're living in. But Matt, what you so lovely touched upon, the ego has created stories and it's created an identity for myself that I see the world through. And there's that specific lens and it gets very clouded. There's a lot of layers that go on top of it, exactly like you're saying. And from my experience, and just so that the listeners will know, the only plant medicine that I've ever done is psilocybin. I've done a couple different journeys. But within that, taking that, and cannabis, even though that's not typically as potent of a medicine, but I do feel I've had some profound experiences with it. What's happened is I felt that ego identity drop, and that there is this connectedness that was deeper down underneath those layers. It's exactly like you're saying. And I'm just, Elise, like obviously we have our traumas, there's things going on in the world, but what I want to touch upon too and highlight is that you wrote a book called Psychedelics for Everyone. And I love the title of that because it's all encompassing. And what I want to ask too, because is within the spiritual community, we hear a lot about like psychedelics to treat depression, anxiety, and I'm all for that. I've experienced that, but the for everyone is such a beautiful statement. Like how do these medicines actually work within people who possibly want to be more creative or more in touch with the true, authentic nature of who they are if they're not experiencing anxiety or depression?
I love all of that. The book is definitely the title is controversial. There are
Yeah.
people who really don't like that title. Um,
You can tell
and,
your
and
publisher I like it.
well, I appreciate that. And I don't think they're understanding that. I don't mean that everyone should take a psychedelic. There are definitely people with existing preconditions, with certain prescriptions and supplements where it's just not safe. But I do think they're good for society. And then to your second point, um, I love that we live in a time where we can access psychedelics in a medical model or a decriminalization model or a spiritual model, and that all three are okay and can be celebrated. So in the medical model, that is about I have depression, anxiety, OCD, and eating disorder, a substance use challenge. I have a something with a diagnosis, and I want it to be measured, and I want to go through a process, and that's beautiful, great. It's very different than the ceremonial model, which is, yeah, it might be healing that you want to do, but they're not making a medical claim. They're saying, let's connect with source or spirit or whatever you want to call it. Let's go inside and then let's bring whatever's inside up and out. Um, and I like that. And I think the decriminalization model straddles both. Part of them says, they have this libertarian view of no adult should tell another adult that they shouldn't put nature in their body. That's beautiful. I get it. Great. They also talk about access. In the medical model, it's super expensive. So what about those that can't afford it? What about those that don't want to pay for it? I get that decriminalization model, and then they're kind of they don't care what the purpose is. You can do it for medical purposes. You can do it for spiritual. It doesn't matter. It should be decriminalized. Period. And I didn't, as a non-drug user, I didn't think about things like that.
Mm.
But at this point in my life, yeah, it's really important, and I hope that I hope to remind myself and that we need all three of these models to be successful. We would not have as much happening in the spiritual and the decrim had we not had 200 academic institutions studying psychedelics and helping shift the cultural perspective on psychedelics. So all three things are important and different and the same.
Yeah, there's something real interesting about if you're only going with the medical model, then you're reliant on a doctor to tell you that you're sick enough that you can take it. When all you really want to do is like explore like nature, like you said, like we have this innate drive to want to grow and evolve, and then it's like I lean toward that libertarian side of no adult should be telling another adult what they can and cannot do or put in their bodies. And I think it is strange when we need to almost like prove to a doctor that we're sick enough that we can go do something that's going to enhance our life.
Totally agree with you, Dan. And in our culture, we've really elevated our doctors to be like our high priests. They're the ones who know better than anybody um, what we should do.
Mm.
And that's not always ideal. I think you've heard me talk about this with psychedelics. Alan Watts talked about this. What in the old days, pre-Western society, we just had healers, and the healers were both kind of medical and spiritual. And then in our society, we have separated those roles. Doctors get pure science, spiritual gets death, and then religious things. And what's interesting with psychedelics is, as you know, as you've experienced, they can occasion these spiritual experiences. They can occasion these meaning making experiences, and our doctors aren't really trained in that. And I get if we were to say, okay, well, psychedelics should just be with the spiritual people, you could make the argument that they don't have enough knowledge about the brain and the body to keep me safe. That's totally fair. And then conversely, if you were to give it just to science, they don't have enough spiritual knowledge to keep me safe. So, where are we here in 2024? We are entering a new world of collaboration
Mm.
where spiritual leaders and doctors work together. We have different ways of getting people access, different ways of delivering these medicines, and different ways of processing the integration of these medicines so that people can turn these from being really cool experiences into meaningful lifestyle change, life change. And
Mm.
that's I think where the power is.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's beautiful. Can you touch upon a little bit for people to understand where they can access these psychedelics here. We're in the United States, although we do have listeners that are all across the, globe. But yeah, how do they access, and what are those kind of three main areas to receive them from, or to get guidance and support from?
Yeah. So for those, let's just take them in that sequence. For those in the medical model, we have ketamine legal in all 50 states. And then the caution that I put out there for anyone listening is legal. Let me try it this way. There are ideological divisions in how ketamine should be delivered. Some people believe it's a biochemical reaction. So you can come into a clinic, you can put an IV in your arm, you can get your ketamine, and they'll send you on your way. Other doctors believe it's a biochemical, psychosocial, spiritual process, and they're going to take you in a preparation. They're going to put you maybe in a living room environment with a blanket and some music and an eye mask, and help you go deeper within and have the journey be part of the experience. And then afterwards, they might work with you with some integration processes, and that could be coaching, it can be therapy, it can look like a lot of different things. In our country, the pricing might not be that different. Or it might be, but it's up to us as consumers to know what do we want and then to go get it. And if the place we're getting the ketamine from can't provide it, maybe we want to supplement it somewhere else. This is particularly true also with not just the IV ketamine clinics, but with the at-home ketamine where you're getting it delivered. We're left to your own devices for a lot of things. So paying even extra attention to what do you want this experience to be is super, super important. So, okay, medical model. We talked about ketamine. There are clinical trials. I mean, they're happening all over. Just down here at UNC, they're doing a psilocybin trial right now. But if you go online and look up psychedelic clinical trials, psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, DMT, 5-MeO, DMT, there are trials all over. And if you can get yourself into a trial, that's a great way to access the medicine in that medical model. Moving to, and then of course, Oregon has legal psychedelics, and there are a lot of people flying up to Oregon, or you can fly to different places in Central America. So we got Mexico, we have Costa Rica, we have Colombia, Jamaica has legal psychedelics or legal mushrooms. So people are doing that as well. And then, and that's where you went. Did you go to where did you go? Costa Rica?
Yeah, we went to Costa Rica. We were on the Nicoya Peninsula in Nasara. Yeah, we had, it was kind of like the model you were talking about. This was obviously with, a medicine woman, and there was 10 of us on a wellness retreat, and we had done months of preparation for this ceremony. It was very intentional. There was a lot of frequency and energy work, understanding. We worked with the medicine woman as well as the gentleman who hosted the wellness retreat on what we were really looking to achieve and let go of or gain more of within our life, which is how Dan and I wanted that to be for us. And we can get into that certainly, because Dan had a very profound experience on it. Mine was probably a little bit less, just from what he had shared with me. We can get into that now, actually, if you'd like, because I think it's going to help tap into emotional healing in a sense, which I really would like to get into.
So let's go in there. Let's just finish up so quick. We talked about medical. I think what you're talking about would be kind of more in the ceremonial or wellness camp. So let's go there. And just quickly then on ceremonial, we have psychedelic churches all across the country, entheogenic churches. We don't know the number, somewhere between 200 and 2,000, probably closer to 1,000 is my guess, but nobody knows. They are practicing under what's called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And most of them, with the exception of 4, the Native American Church and 3 ayahuasca churches, have true federal exemptions where what they are doing is actually documented as legal. The rest of them believe they're protected under statute and law, but they're not technically legal because they don't have the federal exemption. So just be aware of that if that's a practice you would like to do. I think for many of those churches, they run a strong defense. They are ready in case there should be a government action, that they have their ducks in a row and they can show that they have really done this as sincere religious belief and are super thoughtful. There's others that are not as thoughtful and again, using discernment. So back to you, Dan. You said you had this really incredible, powerful experience down there with psilocybin. So again, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms,
Mhm.
in this wellness, in this ceremonial, in this, you didn't have to prove you had enough depression or anxiety to go on this retreat, but you could work on whatever you wanted.
Yep, this was my choice, and like Elise was saying, like we put a lot of work in. It was kind of years of getting myself ready for the ceremony. So I had done mushrooms a few times. I had done them, for the first time was very recreational, back when I was in college. Did it once and had a great experience, but it wasn't transformational. Then Elise and I had a few times where we did it ourselves, which was much more kind of, I guess, like enlightening and really opened me up a little bit more. But then this was the first time in a true ceremony where I took a much larger dose than I had taken before, and went through a lot of, I guess, just processing things and kind of experience, going through some different experiences. And then along the way, we were just sitting by the fire, and I had a moment, or it was a kind of a long moment.
It's a long moment.
I had a very long moment of I was just feeling everything all at once. So I'd be like, laughing, like hysterically laughing and crying. And also I was very serious and I was very contemplative and just sort of like all the emotions at once. And I had this realization that this is what life is always like. Every emotion is always present. And it's that I'm choosing which one I'm experiencing in the moment, and I'm also assigning stories and meanings to it. But while I was experiencing the medicine, I could go from being like unbelievably happy to bawling my eyes out. And it wasn't like a laughing until I was crying thing. It was like they were both there, and it was like really sad tears and really, really happy laughter. And there was like anger, and there was like this like stoic, like just staring at the fire, and it was all at once. And it just gave me this whole new realization of separating and detaching myself from the emotions and from the stories that are happening in the emotions, and kind of realizing that it's all there. Just life is all happening right now in this one moment. And it was really, really profound.
That sounds profound. Sounds
I
beautiful.
hope when I explain it, it sounds anywhere near what I was feeling.
It never does. And that's, I mean, that is one of the challenges with this work, is that there is a language gate, that there is an ineffability of what we do. And that it really, let me try it this way. When I'm sharing something happened to me in a psychedelic experience, yes, I'm sharing that with you or whomever, but it's really even the sharing of it is for me. It's for my learning, healing, and growing. So I'm trying to find words. I'm trying to make sense of this thing. And I don't know about you, Dan, but let me ask it as a question. I mean, are you typically a very feeling type of person? Are you more in your head? Where does this fit in?
You answered my question, because I was going to jump in after he said it. It's for the audience will probably know, because we've talked about it. No, he's not. He's very emotionally unavailable.
Yeah.
He's gotten much better through this wellness journey and this 10-year journey of opening up. But think that was also one of the profound experiences that I had. I had my own, obviously, experiences with the psilocybin during that ceremony, but I wholeheartedly believe that part of that was to witness the extent of what he was feeling, because he does not show feelings or emotions very much. And when we were sitting around the fire pit, it was just him, myself, and then one other girl. The majority of the other participants were still in the ceremony space. But we had a fire keeper that was very powerful. So it was just the three of us. And her and I were kind of sitting off to the side. And then Dan was just, I mean, you can imagine how hot it was. It was a day ceremony in Costa Rica. It's 100 degrees and we're sitting around a fire. So he's just sitting there. And again, it's going to be very hard to put into words, but to witness him hysterically crying with the saddest, deepest, darkest expression, but also simultaneously laughing and giggling emerging that like childlike innocence, then being very just wise and stoic like a lion, just like contently looking at it, just over and over, like all of these emotions and feelings, like to see it. And I just was looking at him like in awe, because then I realized, holy crap, this is the essence of who we are as sentient beings, feeling everything in this moment. And I swear I'm still integrating that as I'm now able to see that. And I feel like I've never accessed that. I know you don't know us, but we've been together almost 20 years. And I've never seen the depth of feeling that he had. So it was so unbelievably beautiful for us and our relationship to have grown into actually seeing like the core of who he is underneath that ego identity.
That was beautiful.
Yeah. I'd tack on to that. I would answer your question and say, like, I think when I was young, as like a child, I was very emotional. And then along the line, it got like, I don't want to say beaten out of me, but like life, not physically, but kind of life beat that out of me a little bit. But there's a lot of suppressed and repressed emotions for a long time. And a lot of that came to the surface that day during that ceremony.
It is in our culture. I think it's so common for men in particular that boys don't cry. We're not supposed to have emotion. We're supposed to produce. We're supposed to do. And with that, we then model our behaviors accordingly. And it can be a challenge. It was a challenge for me. It is a challenge for me. So I certainly resonate with that. And I also didn't grow up learning a lot about emotions. I never put the thought of what is an emotion? What do you mean? It's our body's way of telling us something where language hasn't yet taken form. And what does that mean? And what do I do with these emotions? Yeah, so I can appreciate how different and good and strong it felt to have that range of emotion all in one period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
What has this done with your relationship? And if you've covered all this already, tell me, but how is this actually manifesting in real life?
I believe it's helped us step more into our masculine and feminine roles within the relationship. And I want to speak for myself. I feel like part of the intention that I had going into the ceremony was I wanted to leave a lot of sadness and grief. I had a lot of loss within the year leading up to the ceremony, which almost happened immediately within the first hour. Then the twofold of this intention that I had was to let go of the aspects of myself that were limiting me and holding me back into stepping forward to this next chapter. And I feel that very much unfolding. And a big part of who I thought I used to be, the story that I told myself, was that I was like a doer. It was very masculine. I had to do. That was where my worth and my value came into. And now I'm very much understanding. I wholeheartedly am a very sensitive being, an empath at heart. Like I feel deeply, but I suppress so much of that. So being able to witness him also allowed me to witness it within myself, even though I didn't have it during the ceremony. And it's really unfolded for me probably within the last like 9 or 10 months that I've never been able to feel the depth of who I actually am until recently. And what I've noticed is that I'm able to pick up on things that he's feeling without saying in our relationship, if that makes sense. So like I feel like I got better at listening, or perhaps I got better at being present, because I feel being present, truly dropping into that I am now moment, allows a deeper access for myself to listen better. But like I said, we've been together for so long, it's hard to read his emotions or feel, but I'm now, I think, being able to listen a little bit deeper, perhaps drop into that present moment and ask him more about, all right, how does this feel within you? I'm hearing this, tell me more. Or this is, perhaps he'll say he's working through something. I say, okay, can I give you a different opinion or a different way to look at something? I would say that's probably, which has helped us tremendously.
Elise mentioned, it's been almost 20 years that we've been together. So we were young. So I think a lot of our relationship is very codependent and a lot of almost like a blending of the two of us. Whereas like not knowing, we'd been together for so long, not knowing where one of us ends and the other begins, and like homogenized in the relationship a little bit. So there is like she said, a little bit more of like stepping into those roles where I think she was more masculine in like by having to do things and having to produce and just do and do and do. I was probably a lot more of like a little boy and not quite hadn't really stepped into that masculine kind of role, which caused her to probably need to keep perpetuating more of the masculine and keeping that balance. Where I think that since that ceremony, we've been able to polarize more in a way that's kind of beautiful and like it's balanced, but it's not homogenized, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. Did something happen when you were young, Elise, that put you into a role of producing early on?
For some reason, the story that my ego created was to gain love and acceptance, I have to do things. It's not okay for me just to be me, where, and again, like couldn't say like one specific thing. I just know that like if I got a good grade, I was praised. I was like a big athlete. If I ever performed there, like I was the captain, the MVP, like that's where I got, the most praise from, like doing things. Like if I cleaned my room or if I did, the chores, or if I shoveled the thing, cooking, cleaning. So I just adapted like, oh, okay, so I have to gotta do things, I guess, to get love. And I'm realizing it's the opposite of that. Or at
And
least
Dan,
I can't speak for myself, at least for me.
yeah, no, it makes total sense. Dan, was that your experience?
My experience, I was a middle child. So I feel like I had a lot of sort of like I was like the peacekeeper in a lot of sense. I adapted to make everybody else happy, or at least that's sort of the way I perceive it, and that's the way I remember my childhood. Where like my older brother would get in trouble a lot, so I would try to do the opposite of what he did to get my parents. So it was always a lot of like appeasing. And I think I grew up sort of like just trying to appease everybody all the time and have everybody be comfortable around me. So then I think when Elise and I got together and she was like, well, I'm going to control everything because that makes me comfortable. And I was like, all right, we're going to do everything your way. And just pressed and repressed a lot. And then it was sort of a long process of kind of finding my own voice and finding who I am again. And this ceremony, the mushroom ceremony, was a huge part of that, where it was like I was able to think of it as almost like a rite of passage, and I was able to leave a lot of who I thought I was behind and kind of step into who I really am or who I want to be.
I love that language, the finding who I am, the remembering who I am, the notion, the idea that we're all these spiritual beings that are loved, that are smart, that are beautiful, that have this innate intelligence and the right to be. And then we start doing things for others, and then we start appeasing others, and then we start performing for others. And I like in this medicine this idea that we're not using this medicine to change who we are. We're using these medicines to remember who we are, and then to bring that up. And how do I celebrate that? And how do I do that from a place of strength and of confidence and not of fear? How do I remember that I'm okay, period? How do I remember that if I just stop and just remind myself, look, I'm standing on this earth and the earth is supporting me. All around me are trees and beautifulness that's supporting me. I am not alone ever in this experience that we have. And I forget sometimes. And these medicines help me remember those things that I know are true, but I ignore.
Yeah, it's so powerful.
I know we've talked a lot about us and how it's like emotionally helped us. So like I said, it helped me drop more into the present moment, be more mindful. How have these medicines and psychedelics helped you? And please share, if you don't mind, to what degree you feel comfortable, because you've experienced so many different ones and have done MDMA and ayahuasca. Dan and I haven't experienced those. If you could give us maybe perhaps how they show up for yourself in different ways, different mindfulness practices in your body, and obviously with other people, if you've heard experiences from other people you'd like to share as well.
Yeah, another interesting thing in the space that it's like what a question I get all the time is like, well, which one should I do, or
Oh,
what's the difference? And um, we have this idea of like you're called to do certain medicine. What the heck does that mean? If like that sounds very woo-woo. What do you mean you're called? Well, sometimes it's like, okay, I've been reading a lot about psilocybin keeps appearing in my consciousness. Okay, well, that might be an indication that maybe that's the one you should try. Or ayahuasca keeps appearing in my consciousness. Great. Um, so I think people can find themselves at a variety of medicines in a bunch of different ways. There are differences between these medicines, and there's differences in um, technically in how they work. And I think for those starting out, it doesn't really matter. So what matters is pick one that you're not contraindicated against. So what do I mean? If you're taking an SSRI, ayahuasca and MDMA are bad ideas. But maybe ketamine or psilocybin will work for you. If I mean, also if you are not taking any medicine and you are really dealing with issues of love and acceptance, or maybe trauma, MDMA is a great place to start, and so is psilocybin. They're just, again, different purposes. I was just with a group of veterans down in Peru. We were doing a week of ayahuasca. They wanted both that physical experience. They wanted the purging. They wanted the the intensity that comes with that medicine that kind of fits in with the way they live their lives. Um, but I think people can have similar breakthroughs with other medicines. So I think it's less about which medicine do you choose, and it's more about how open are you to the medicine. And I think, Dan, at least what you were talking about with the preparation. Do you have clarity around your intention? Are you doing this for yourself? Do you feel really good about what could happen, and understanding what to do in the moment? And then the integration. Okay, I now saw all these things. I had these awakenings. I had these awarenesses. I had these insights. What do I do with this? And how do I take us, particularly in that first 30 days following the experience where your brain is so neuroplastic? How do you take advantage of that? And that's extra important for people who are trying to really make radical behavioral change. So how do you train your mind, train your body towards those changes?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's been over a year for us since we had coming up on a year, and I'm still integrating things, and I still go back to the notebook I had that week, and I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. Like that's relevant now. Like things keep coming up.
Yeah.
1 minute. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elise.
I was just going to say for myself too, I feel like it's allowed me to tap more into a creative aspect of myself where I've got more, like I have an itch to do more things creatively, as opposed to anything kind of like that masculine, like just fixing around the house, like cleaning and stuff. It's like, oh, I really am interested actually more in art and photography, and like looking through this different lens of an eye, that meaning like the capital I, the capital S self, but also literally like the physical eyes that I'm seeing through right now in a much different way. I feel like my perspective is broadened, and the only way that I can describe it in a way is like I'll be walking down the street, and as opposed to like the myopic view of just the sidewalk that I'm looking at, like I can see it bigger now. Like I can look so much more at like all of the houses and the trees around me. It's like I've walked for 37 years, and have I been missing this whole time? And it's something so little as that, but it's really profound for myself, when I just all of a sudden I realized it one day, like this was months ago that I realized it, but that's the best of my ability that I can like share, that like I feel my perspective is broadened. I can see vibrant colors better. I can feel like the trees talking to me and waving to me. I know that that sounds woo woo, but there's like that connectedness that still stayed even after the ceremonies ended.
I love that. The attention that we give to things matters. So whether we are coloring or photography or mandala making or any of those, that's one way to both give concentrated attention to something. It's also a way to express creativity without having to talk, just to do something. In some of the church services I'm involved with, one of the first exercises is we sit down in a circle and we close our eyes and we listen. And how many different animals and sounds do we hear? We then smell and really pay attention. What do we smell? What are the different smells of the environment that we can taste? We can experience. And then we stand up and we just walk around this um the lush landscape around us, and we look and just pay attention instead of seeing that green wall that we all walk by every single day and just don't even pay attention to it. We see the bugs and the birds and the flowers and the green and the thorns and the ivy and all those things in a way that we don't. And it is such a beautiful reminder of, oh my gosh, this was here a moment ago and I didn't see it. And so much of life, again, speaking from the eye, is like that. It was here a moment ago and I didn't see it. The kids grow up so fast and I didn't see them growing up, as would be another example. It just happened. And it happened yes, there were moments of awareness and a whole bunch of, for me, moments of non-awareness. And it's not, I don't want to be sad about that. It's just something that I'm aware of.
Yes.
Are you a member of a church, or is it just more like research?
No, I'm part of an entheogenic church as well.
Wow. What is that like, if you don't mind me asking? Like, is it are there regular ceremonies? Like how often is it, and what is the ceremony like?
Yeah, we have about 8 ceremonies a year in the United States, and then we have international ones. Um, and they're beautiful. I've worked with a variety of different ones. So I can talk about like the ones I mostly work with are psilocybin based churches for a number of reasons. That single sacrament um is what these churches practice with. Others work with MDA or sassafras, which is like MDMA, just a little bit longer, stronger, more visual. Others work with 5-MeO DMT, which we have not talked about, which is kind of what we can talk about in a little bit. Um, what I think makes this, and I struggle with the word church because it comes with so much baggage for so many people. This organized religion, this institutionalized religion that's caused so much harm over the years. So there's a Sufi expression which is love the water more and the pitcher less. So how do we take the beauty in the teachings of these wisdom traditions, and how do we celebrate that? How do we celebrate that we're spiritual creatures having a human experience? How do we celebrate this interconnectedness of us? How do we celebrate the love that's in us? And that's kind of what these services, it's not kind of, it is what these services are about. So we see ourselves as creating a space for people to step in and do whatever work that they want to do. None of us serve medicine, but we bring in amazing medicine people to actually serve the medicine. We bring in musicians to create the soundtrack for the guide to people using music. We bring in the chefs to keep people nourished. And we just trust that if we and we bring in medical people to do the intake up front to make sure we don't have people with contraindications and to keep the risk as reduced as possible. Yeah, so all of those things are designed for how do we create as safe of a space as possible for people to do this type of work using these medicines that connect them with source, that connect them with each other, that connect them with themselves. And then we typically do 4 weeks of integration afterwards with calls each week. We have a journal that we give everybody, and then we also have drop-ins every month, and then a whole bunch of non-medicine things that are just community activities, from bringing in monks and Sufi experts and songs of devotion and sat songs and just stuff, just things to keep the community um, connected.
That's
Yeah,
really
it sounds like just like a ceremonial community in a sense, more so than like corporate religion and what we tend to think of as church in the West. Like what you're describing sounds beautiful.
I really love it. I mean, our dogma is pretty simple, and because it's so simple, it has room for people from all faith traditions, which is super important. We think of ourselves as really spiritually integrated with a variety of traditions. On our altars, typically there is everything from a uh, um, a Quran to a cross to a menorah to thinking through here a Buddha, prayer Tibetan prayer wheel. There's a Virgin Mary. And then there's the flowers. There's room for everybody in ceremony. Um, and then what we find is people go and they tend to go to whatever it is that they're comfortable with their faith tradition. So some people it might be just yoga, but others like there is a Christian psychedelic organization. There's members of our group who spend time there. There's a Jewish psychedelic association. There's Muslims in psychedelics. There's certainly a lot of Buddhists in psychedelics. So there's lots of lots of ways you can bring different wisdoms in, and then you can I'm gonna keep swinging from the eye. I can take out these new insights and bring them back to wherever it is whatever it is for me that's community.
Mhm.
Yes, that's beautiful. I feel like I think I heard you say on a podcast that these medicines, these psychedelics really are catalysts for what we'd like to cultivate more into our lives and create something that is perhaps transformational or a different path, opening a new chapter wherever we are stepping into, the co-creators that we are of our life. And I kind of want to get into that actually.
Let me just can we just make a quick tweak on language, just a little bit. I love what you're saying. I just want to just one little nuance.
Yeah.
The catalyst for me with psychedelics is the awareness.
Mm,
It's, oh, I see this that I did not see before.
sure.
From awareness, then comes in a perfect world, then comes time to process. What does that awareness mean? How does it make me feel? Where does it sit in my body? Where does it sit? Then, okay, I feel good about this awareness. I understand this awareness. Then we can swing into action. What do I want to do with that awareness? And then I want to make change or I don't want to make change. Um, Even when I think about an apology now, an apology, what does it do to say I'm sorry? Not that much. But what does it do to say, I see now that when I did whatever, I was not acting with the level of awareness that I should have brought to that situation, or I could have
Mhm.
brought to that situation. I see it now. I truly understand it now. I'll never do that again. And I hope you understand. It's
Yes,
just, it's different.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you for that distinction. I love when I can get that reflection back. It makes complete sense. So I appreciate the the tweak there. Because yes, well, where I was going with that, I feel like you already began talking about, and we can maybe continue the conversation. Is yes, we have now this new perception, which creates a better, deeper understanding. I just said this when Dan and I were talking, actually doing a solo episode. The more aware you are, the more aware you are.
Mhm.
It's kind of repetitive, but that is it. And it is allowed a deeper awareness into all of the thoughts, feelings, and actions within my life. And so much of this show is about creating and becoming the version of ourselves that we already are. As we've, discussed, it's there. It's just covered in a little bit of like layers or muck, or, it's distorted. It's not the correct vantage point that, our illusion of separation, unfortunately, has tied us down. So how can we kind of use these to perhaps become more aware, enhance, be more, what other words do I want to use? Open to creating a different life if that feels good in a certain way for the individual.
I love your questions. What's coming up for me is the openness is what started the conversation. You are already open. I was already open. Whoever's listening to this is already open. Just by, if you're still listening to this after 40 minutes, you're open.
Yeah.
So then, okay, I'm open. Now what? Okay, I'm going to use these tools. I'm going to use this technology. I'm going to use this medicine. I'm going to use these drugs, whatever word you're comfortable with, to do something. But I'm not quite sure what the to do is, because it's not a spreadsheet that I can just check it off. Okay, so I'm going to surrender to this process. Okay, I can wrap my head around that. Surrender this process, and I'm going to have whatever comes up come up. Okay, and then I'm going to see things. And from those seeings, I'm going to know things. And from knowing things, I'm going to go do things. And for many of us, and for me, how you can get talking from the eye, what I thought was going to be a one-time experience has become a practice. And the practice is, okay, I'm preparing, I'm in community. It's now time to actually celebrate and explore in community and in self. So then I'm going to take some medicine. I'm going to do that. And I'm going to go back into integration. I'm going to do that for a while. And then I'm going to come back around and do it again. And not everybody needs to. There are people who feel like I've done this once or twice in my life. I don't need to ever do it again. Great. That's beautiful. And there's others who practice with much more frequency. I know for me, this medicine opened me up to meditation. This medicine opened me up to yoga. This medicine opened me up to a different type of nature walking. This medicine opened me up to different types of conversation. And for others, they can stay in those other realms, and in the holotropic breath work, in the mindfulness, the contemplative practices, and they don't need to go back to the medicine. That's great for them. So it's what do you feel called to do, and what do you feel comfortable doing? What do you want to do because you want to do it, not because I've suggested it or someone else has suggested, because you want to do this. Which then takes us back to, okay, great. Then how do you keep yourself as safe as possible? Which means, how do you make sure the medicine you're using is pure? How do you make sure your mindset is as strong as possible going in? And then how do you make sure your setting, when you're going to be in this vulnerable state, this non-ordinary state of consciousness, how do you make sure your setting is as safe as possible? I mean, there's a higher risk. Most of these medicines, not all, but most of these medicines are non-toxic, non-addictive. So it's not really a physical risk to some, but not really the physical risk with the medicine. The risk is the environmental risks with the medicine. And how do you strategize against those things? So people say, oh, I don't need a guide. I can do this by myself, or I can do this here. You can, of course. And it's there's a level of safety that your body knows isn't there, and you're putting yourself in more risk. Even people who say, okay, I just had this one guide. It was me and one person. That's risky. Incredibly vulnerable in these medicines. And if you haven't done it, if you don't understand, I'm going to use what it feels like to be in a heart opener, and how much love you have for yourself and others, and what that can translate to, that's different. And same with other medicines, where it's, okay, I'm having this, I see the interconnectedness of all things, and I want to be connected to all things. And it's helpful to have some guardrails sometimes. Not saying you have to at all. I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but it can be helpful.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
I want to touch, we've talked a lot about sort of this shift in awareness and perspective. And I do want to kind of lean into a little bit, and you can probably explain this better than I can, but there is actual physical changes taking place too, and sort of the neuroplasticity of our brains. And we're literally rewiring our brain with these medicines. So this is something that helps us on kind of so many different levels.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The first thing that happens is our default mode network. It's gonna, again, I'm talking super high level. This is, if you're listening to this as a scientist, you're gonna say, well, it's not quite, this is close enough for this audience. So at a high level, your default mode network quiets down. So think of that inner narrator, that voice that's telling us, at least you need to do more. You need to go get that A. You need to clean your room. You're not good enough. it quiets that down. So for me, that feels like the weight of the world is lifted off my shoulders. It just feels so quiet when that monkey mind is toned down. Then we have this really cool thing where our connections, our neural pathways just light up all over our brain. So it doesn't add neural pathways. It just takes them like the old telephone switch operator. Instead of going always to the same two connections, it rewires and it's going everywhere. And that's our repetitive thinking patterns. As we get older, we literally start thinking the same way over and over and over. Well, this reminds us, but it physically is changing our brains so that we can say, oh, I don't have to think about this the same way I've been thinking about this. I don't have to think of myself as passive and accepting everything Elise says. I don't have to be responsible for Dan and everything in his life. And it's not my job to do the laundry. Um, it's just a different way of thinking about the world. Then we also have true neuroplasticity. Think about like when we're kids and how fast we can learn things. Well, that kicks back in. And with that, and that lasts for a good solid 30 days ish after a psychedelic. Well, so if we're going to start saying, I'm going to decrease my alcohol consumption, I'm going to change the way I show up in different things, that's a really good time to take advantage of that because the brain wants to remember. And that's where having an integration process, whether it's a journal, working with a coach or a therapist or a group, having someone that's helping push that and not push it in I know better than you. It's how do I just help you achieve what you're trying to achieve in this process?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great answer. Exactly what I needed. Can we touch? You started to touch on some of the different medicines, MEO, DMT, and
Yeah.
the sassafras root, and all these different. Like, can we kind of touch on what they are and maybe what some of the differences are, so people have an idea?
Yeah, I think what I've seen I'll go through the most common when I think about the heart openers. So when people are saying I'm going to go and do MDMA, which we might know as Molly or ecstasy, or MDA, which is close enough. Those are in the heart opener family. So we've heard a lot about that in the news because that's the one that they've done 2 phase 3 clinical trials with people with treatment resistant post traumatic stress disorders. So think about veterans, first responders, victims of sexual assault. What's extra powerful about this particular medicine is it kind of turns off shame, blame, and guilt. And with those turned off, we can re-see ourselves in different situations, reprocess that information, move forward. So again, imagine treatment-resistant PTSD with a veteran can be super helpful. The FDA has not approved this yet as a medicine, but we're certainly hoping that they will one of these years. And though again, empathogens is another word for those heart openers. It makes you feel so much. Psilocybin, LSD are more classic psychedelics. Close. I mean, they're psilocybin's obviously from nature. LSD is more synthetic. The LSD is longer, but the interconnectedness of all things, being able to see all those stories, those things happen with their ayahuasca in that same family that has DMT as the active ingredient, but a little longer, more physically demanding. Typically, there's purging involved, so a lot of nausea and diarrhea. But that's also part of the process. I don't love to throw up. And I remember my first ayahuasca ceremony and the Taita's wife said, you're going to find it's part of the most beautiful process or part of the one of the most beautiful things. I don't think I'm going to find that, but she was right. It was beautiful.
Wow.
And it's been my experience ever since then that no matter how awful it sounds or feels, it's beautiful. 5-MeO-DMT we talked about, or Bufo is the other name. So this is the venom of the Bufo alvarius toad. This isn't like any of the others. This is the only non-duality medicine that is known to man. So what does that mean? In every other medicine, there's a subject and an object. It might not be you, but there's a something that you're embodying. And there's a time and a place. It might not be now, but there's some way to understand, oh, this is a long time or a short time or this time or that time. 5-MeO doesn't have any of that. I think of it as like I've dissolved into math, or I've just dissolved into the universe, where I'm just part of the vibration of the world.
Mm.
If for people who've looked at the Om sound, I feel like I'm just living in the Om for however long it is. So people talk about it as it's your personal conversation with your sacred. They talk about it as a way to understand or conceptualize what an afterlife could be, or before life could be, or what a in this life what else could be.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not like any of the others in that it's super short. We're talking about 10 to 20 minutes. We're talking about from the time you inhale it to maybe 10 seconds until you are there. So
Wow.
it's super fast. And it is just yeah, just a different type of medicine. Again, there's contraindications with that one, with the MDA, with MDA, with ayahuasca. Um, The other medicine getting a lot of press is iboga, which is the natural, it's a shrub and a root from Africa, or ibogaine would be the synthetic for people with like heroin addiction. It is incredibly powerful. Um, and it's like a 17 plus hour journey,
Oh, wow.
and there's cardiac risks with ibogaine. So just be mindful of those things with that medicine. Is not as easy or gentle as a psilocybin can be. Not that, and easy is probably the wrong word, but it's not. Just be more aware if that's something you're thinking about.
Thank you. That's
Yeah, that
very
is really
helpful and
helpful.
distinctive. I also, as you were talking, I was very, very intrigued by all of these different ones. But I thought to myself too, as you were explaining, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes ago, you're not telling anybody exactly which ones to take, which ones to do. If there's any listeners that, oh, which one should I do? What I just like it dropped in. It's kind of like I was releasing that egoic sense of telling people they need to try this one, they need to do this, they need to do this. Like, oh my gosh, no, that's exactly right. Who's ever listening to this podcast is perfect for that person because one of these is standing out to them. The reason they've listened to this entire thing, almost an hour now, as we're wrapping up, like they're intrigued. And what a beautiful space I can provide for them as just being me, having this conversation with an expert here in this field and granting that, giving it to the world around me. So I'm so grateful for this conversation that we're having. It just dropped in. And I do, again, believe that there it is. I'm becoming more aware. I'm becoming more aware of the narratives that I thought in my head for so long that I needed to do things or make people, happy, make people, give them the information that's going to change them. It's like, no, how can I show up in this space that I love to do, podcasting, meeting people where I've learned so much and gained so much that now I can recognize there's nothing else I need to do. It's the gift of information, inspiration, perhaps creativity, giving them the opportunity to try something if they feel called to it without telling them or forcing them to do it.
That's right on. It is different in the space in that there's a temptation to share and to tell.
Mhm.
Um, and I have to remind myself that I don't know better than you do what's right for you. I just know what's right for me. So I share my practice. I share what's happened for me. I can share what things have made me feel like. And if that works for you, that works for you. There's a great yoga sutra where they talk about a monkey and a bird in a tree, and the bird is in this nest. It's like a little two-level nest. It's got a little roof on it. It starts to rain its ass off, and the bird's staying dry and looking around like, wow, I love this nest. This nest is awesome. And the bird looks over at the monkey, and the monkey's getting rained on, is soaked. And the bird's like, huh, monkey, why don't you just build a nest like mine? If you just, it doesn't take very long. And if you just build this nest and the rain comes and you stay dry just like me, I mean, look how dry I am. And the monkey looks at the bird, and he looks at the rain, and he feels himself. He knows he's all wet. And then he grabs the bird and throws him down on the ground and rips up the nest and destroys it and throws it out of the tree. And it's a reminder about unsolicited advice. It, it is, if the monkey didn't ask, how do I stay dry? The monkey is not doing that. The monkey was just sitting there minding his own business. And the bird interjected himself into that conversation. So I think about that regularly with what we do. But most of the groups that I work with don't advertise. They attract. Um, and they do that for a reason. I mean, this is not something that yeah, anyone should be coerced into doing or marketed into doing. It's something that if they feel they want to do this and should be and is available for them in all these different methods we talked about earlier. But
Yeah.
it's a super fine line.
Yeah.
I never heard that before. I might use that now if you
Do
don't.
it, take it.
Because that's the epitome of me. If you were, I mean, we're over 140 episodes into the show. Like when we first started it, that's all Dan and I did, and we've talked about it. We preached we were gonna fix everybody and do it, and we quickly realized on our journey ourselves, like that's not it. Like we're carving our own paths as we want other people to just carve their path. And if they take something that we say and it's useful to them, amazing. If not,
amazing.
That's okay. My goodness, do you have any wrap-up questions? I mean, I think we've covered so much, but I want to open the space to make sure that if there's anything that's in your heart or on your mind that you'd like to share as we close here that we didn't cover that you feel is important, please do so.
I think I'm going to end with this, if you don't mind. I love this conversation. I love the enthusiasm. I love the direct experience. I love the thoughtfulness that you've brought to this. I'm just grateful that you invited me on for this. What I didn't realize as a non-drug users, how our culture really does make it challenging to use these experiences. And I didn't realize that while I might not have thought I needed it, that doesn't mean others didn't. So as the last 9 months, I've been working a lot with veterans. My next book is The Veteran's Guide to Psychedelics, comes out later in October. All the proceeds, 100% of the proceeds go to Heroic Hearts Project.
Wow.
And I'm super excited. It reminds me, because it's such a tangible population, of a group that I didn't know much about. And 17 and a half of them are killing themselves every day. We've had over 30,000 veterans kill themselves since 9/11. Only 7,000 died in combat. So we have 4 times the amount of people die of suicide than that. So when I think about the process of getting MDMA approved for them, when I think about that most of these nonprofits are flying our veterans down to Central America and South America, now Oregon, thank goodness, but that's a long way to go for healing. And I think about people who are victims of sexual assault. I think about our first responders. Dan, you talked about why do I have to prove that I have enough of anything to be able to do this? All of which I just think is important. So I'm going to come back to this. Whether the person listening to this ever wants to do a psychedelic or not, that is 100% them. What I do hope they leave this conversation thinking about is, when I vote and when I talk to people, I'm going to understand more about what these medicines can do, and I'm going to have a different, maybe a more informed perspective on the power of these. That these are not. We've lived 50 years in prohibition, and these are not no medical use. These are not high toxicity. These are not addictive.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. I had no idea those statistics of the suicide and deaths. And wow, thank you for sharing that. It's really eye-opening. And my goodness, I can only hope and again put that energy out where it's sharing the essence of how it could possibly heal and help whoever it's calling. So thank you. And this is very exciting because your book will be out at the end of
October. Yep.
Okay, because when this releases, it will be probably after that. So we will absolutely, if you could provide us with the link, we can get that. We'll put the link to your website too, which has immense information on all of these. So anybody who wants to dive deeper, we will link Matt's specific website. Anything else? I think I do have a couple of your social media links that we'll put as well. So everybody does have, the access to your knowledge in these writings. And again, you are a gift to this world. Thank you. Dan and I have taken away so much from this, and we're excited to integrate even further. So thank you for joining us today, Matt. Really, it was an honor to have you on.
It was an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.